Hello everyone, welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan. Later, a review of this year's Preservation Awards. But first, an update on the Historical Society's Most Endangered list, and we welcome Edward Booth Jr.
Hello, Harry.
Ed, nice to have you with us.
It's good to be back to talk about this.
We have some changes on the list from the last time this has been publicized.
Most definitely some losses, but more success stories than bad outcomes.
So we've got about 12 various properties, including a locomotive and a ferry boat.
A boat and a train this time.
So let's go ahead and go to the video, as they say.
Well, as in years past, one of the top endangered structures in Jacksonville is the Lydell School. Mm-hmm. This was built in 1917 as public school number 4 and originally overlooked Riverside Park. It was hemmed in by the construction of the interstate in the 1950s, and then in the late 1990s the enhancements to the interstate totally walled it in. Nonetheless, it is known to travelers throughout the United States because it exists at the intersection of two of the major interstate highways in our nation, I-95 and I-10. And millions of people see it every year.
Unfortunately, there's been some vandalism and other things that make saving it somewhat problematic, I guess.
Very difficult from a traffic noise standpoint, and it has been hemmed in by the interstate highway system. But we continue to watch it, and there's always hope as long as the structure stands.
Okay.
Moving to something that is definitely a structure that can be saved is Fire Station number 5. Sits on Riverside Avenue inside the Fidelity Complex. City of Jacksonville deeded it to Fidelity, and its future is uncertain right now. It needs to be moved to a location where it can be restored and put to a use such as a restaurant. So we have
Firehouse Subs.
Exactly. We have some hope for the structure, but we're waiting on the right person to come along. Now a new addition to the list is the St. Johns River Ferry, which dates back to approximately 1948.
And some people will refer to this as the Mayport Ferry.
Called the Mayport Ferry, and the ferry has utilized several vessels over the years. Most people in Jacksonville remember the Buccaneer, remember the Blackbeard. The Ribeau is the current ferry boat, but due to budget concerns, its future is in doubt and will be decided by the legislature and the City Council over the next few months.
And so the Historical Society is concerned about not just buildings, but other historic structures. And
this is a vessel and a transportation system, and it's part of our history. It's a big tourist draw and something that we think should be saved. We next turn to the La Villa section, which was redeveloped to some extent 10 years ago. It is my hope that the courthouse opening in La Villa next week will spur some more redevelopment down there. These are 3 shotgun-style houses that have been preserved, whose future is uncertain. These date from 1890 to 1930.
And for those who don't know, where does the term shotgun house come from?
That implies that the house is designed with a central hallway extending from the front door to the back door. So one could fire a shotgun through the house, it would go in the front door, out the back door without striking anything.
Okay.
It is one version of where the term shotgun house comes from.
Yeah.
A notable residence down on West 3rd Street was owned by Dr. Horace Drew, prominent Jacksonville resident from a prominent family. This was built in 1909, and it is somewhat of a hodgepodge of architectural styles. It's part Tudor Revival, part Queen Anne, and part Spanish Colonial Revival.
It's in Springfield.
It's in Springfield. It's most notable for this 3-story tower with a turret on top. It is, at the present time, somewhat unsecured, and its future's in doubt. The renovation costs would be very, very expensive. But we believe it's a structure that is notable, has stood the test of time, and should be restored if at all possible. Another view of the Horace Drew residence. Told you we would talk about some different things this time, and we've gone from river ferries to steam trains. Most Jacksonville residents will be familiar with this locomotive. It's Atlantic Coastline engine number 1504. It was built in 1919 in Richmond, Virginia by the American Locomotive Works. It was a standard design that came about during World War I. Served in passenger service for 30 years, running passengers up and down the eastern seaboard. Since 1960, it's been on display in downtown Jacksonville, first in front of what is now the CSX building, until 1986 when the city of Jacksonville acquired it and moved it to behind the Prime Osborne Convention Center.
So a lot of people might not think that the city owns it. I mean, it could be owned by an adjacent railroad company, but it's not. The city owns it.
The city holds title to this train and restored it in 1989. In 1990, it was declared a National Historic Mechanical Engineering Landmark. And it sits today in a state of decline, in quite a bit of disrepair. This is a close-up of the type of corrosion that, if not dealt with in the next few years, could make this unsavable in the near future. It's coming up on its 100th anniversary, and it would certainly be appropriate to restore it and, most importantly, move it under cover. There would seem to be room within the convention center to do that.
Okay.
Another structure that is recognizable to most Jacksonville residents is the Guarantee Trust and Savings Building. This sits on the corner of Ocean and Bay Street, the northeast side. Was built in 1902, remodeled in 1919 to increase its size.
And nowadays it has a big Jaguar in it.
It's known as the Jaguar Building. You pass it on the way to the Jaguar games, and everyone is familiar with it. It's a classic turn-of-the-century bank design. Henry Clutho, noted local architect, had his office there from 1944 to 1960, but the roof structure failed a number of years ago. If you go up in the Florida Theater building, you can look right through where the roof used to be into the interior of the building, and we understand, unfortunately, it is scheduled for demolition perhaps sometime this year. So this is an example of a building that, while we believe it should be saved, it is probably too late to do so. Moving on to a more modern building, just a couple of blocks away, the Hayden Burns Library from 1964. And Harry, why don't you tell us about the building that used to stand on that site?
Well, it used to be a Clutho, mentioning Clutho City Hall, which was a real loss because it was torn down. Not comparing the two buildings necessarily, but too bad that a great Clutho building had to be torn down for anything. And this building, of course, is debatable. There are a lot of people who love it, a lot of people who don't, but it's representative of an era of architecture and worth saving, we think.
There are probably as many opinions on this building as we have members of the Historical Society, I would think.
And it's interesting because you can be there and look across the street diagonally and see an earlier library, the Carnegie Library, now a law firm, a building that was restored, and then another couple of blocks over, the new main library, all right there within a couple of blocks of each other. Anyway, go ahead.
The Seminole Club, which sits on the west side of the St. James Building, City Hall, was built in 1902 and was, to this day, remains one of the oldest surviving private clubs in America. It's a wooden structure that is in a reasonable state of repair.
Yeah, it's not. It's in pretty good condition.
It really is. It's been properly maintained and is available for anyone that would like to turn this into office space or perhaps reopen it as a private club. One interesting story about this front porch is President Teddy Roosevelt once delivered a campaign speech to the people congregated on that side of Hemming Plaza around the turn of the last century. Staying downtown, we turn to the Barnett Bank building, which was built in 1926. At 18 stories, it was the tallest building in Jacksonville for over 28 years. I think it's important to note what was going on in downtown Jacksonville in the mid-1920s. 1926 has been called the year of the skyscraper in Jacksonville. There were no fewer than 7 buildings that were 7 stories or taller under construction, and that was quite revolutionary. But this is a building that structurally is in good shape, and an attempt was made several years ago to renovate it. Unfortunately, the money ran out part of the way through, and it sits in a state of partial renovation. But and we'll talk in a minute about some plans to take this area and thoroughly revitalize it. We next turn to what is referred to as the Laura Street Trio. It's a series of 3 buildings, all dating from the same era. The first is the Florida Life Building. It's a 1911 Clutho design, generally thought to be the purest interpretation of a skyscraper in Jacksonville. It was the tallest building in Jacksonville for a year or more. While it's called the Florida Life Building, the Florida Life insurance company went bankrupt shortly after moving in, and so it's been used by other businesses over the years, but it's a sturdy structure over 100 years old that could be combined into some other structures to help revitalize that part of downtown. The old Florida National Bank building also dates to 1902. Known to most of us as the Marble Bank, it's a 1902 neoclassical revival style. Was renovated in 1978, used for a number of years, and currently sits vacant. The third part of this trio is known as the Bisbee Building. And this was a Clutho design from 1908, 10 stories of reinforced concrete. It was notable for the construction technique, as well as for the fact this was the tallest building in the state of Florida at the time it was built. It's a classic Chicago-style skyscraper architecture, and has stood the test of time. And there are some plans that were proposed a year and a half ago by a group in Tallahassee to combine the Laura Street Trio together with some structures connecting them together, a new apartment building next door, a parking garage, and a renovation of the Barnett Bank building to create a whole new redesign for that area. Price seems to be the issue. It's around a $70 million project, and it's thought to require some input from the city. The final structure on this list is the Ford Assembly Plant. People can see this crossing the Matthews Bridge looking to the east on the north bank of the St. Johns River. Built in 1924, designed by a noted industrial architect named Albert Kahn, not the Shahid Khan that is now the owner of the Jaguars, but an influential architect in the Detroit area who designed hundreds of buildings for Henry Ford. Built 200 Model Ts a day during its prime, employed 800 people, and Ford used this building until 1960. It's in good shape, and it could certainly be put to uses.
So that's the 12, not in any particular order. And let's talk briefly, we're almost out of time, about some of the buildings. You've got some losses and some successes that we want to just cover very briefly.
That's correct. Just since we last met on this topic, we have lost a number of notable structures. One is the New Berlin Hotel on the Dames Point area. It was torn down just a couple of weeks ago. It's the oldest wooden structure, we think, in the state of Florida. The Jacksonville Jewish Center, sturdy building at 3rd and Silver Street.
Sometimes known as the Job Corps. As
the Job Corps building, and here's a view of it, unfortunately burning early one Monday morning. And then we have structures such as Jennifer's Hall, where musician Ray Charles got his start, that have been taken apart to the extent there's really nothing original left, and they can't be saved. There's some success stories, if we have just a brief moment to go through. Brewster Hospital, moved, relocated, and finished, completely restored. Unfortunately, it's vacant. There has not been a use found for it, and it again stands in danger. Our real success story is the John Gorrie High School. Dolores Weaver renovated this into a residential complex, and it has been an unqualified success. The photograph on the picture of our Historic Sites books features some eagles. They are actually part of the Lola Culver School. It was closed by the Duval County School Board 3 years ago. The good news is that a private school has taken it over. The eagles have been unveiled again. They sit proudly as Clutho envisioned them and as they are depicted on the cover of our book. The old Federal Courthouse, classic 1930s design, it is being turned into the State Attorney's Office for the new courthouse complex. And then finally here, the Friendship Fountain, which had been on our watch list for many, many years, a centerpiece of Jacksonville. This was the best the fountain could do until renovation. That was at full power. It has been fully restored to its original glory. The high-altitude water jet works again, the lighting, the music. It's what we're very proud of, and the type of thing that we encourage as the Jacksonville Historical Society. So that's an update on historic structures in Jacksonville.
Okay. Ed Booth, Jr., thank you very much for the update on the Historical Society's most endangered list. I hope you'll come back soon.
I will look forward to it, Harry. Thank you.
And stay tuned. Coming next, a review of this year's Preservation Awards.